bubbles there are lit. Wild yeast.
What's the name again?
Oh, it's Kaluna honey. It's normally £18 a jar, but you can see how many bubbles it's got in it. They're not going to be selling that.
Oh, it is a bit of
honeycomb, isn't it? Beautiful. Well, of course it is honeycomb.
Have a taste.
Oh, that's exceptional. Oh, that's so banging. You say it's fermented from the taste?
A little bit.
I suppose the fact, you can't.
In this book by Stefan Harold Buna really reveals sort of the roots of fermentation, like where it came from. So like when someone made the discovery that they left honey in a vessel of spring water and it fermented into mead. From then, all of the infusions that came out of it, people using the plants, infusing them in water, finding ways to ferment that water.
There's this honey company on Lewis Road, and they order honey from all over. And this honey had too much of a high percentage of water in it, so it started to ferment. And so they couldn't sell it.
It's not bad for you guys.
No, it's not bad for you at all. It's like comes out and it's still alive.
Clean the jars off first from the outside in that water. Then you pour the honey in the 25 litre thingy.
Yeah.
Then all the residue that's left in the jar we clean out in the water.
Okay.
There was some. I put the thermometer in and it wasn't cleaned properly, so there's bits of shit in there. Yeah.
It's when they describe how hopped beer came into popularity, which took hundreds of years. It was around the time of the Protestant Reformation, and basically the Catholic churches at the time had a monopoly over ale production, and the ale that they brewed was mainly an ale called Gruit ale, and that was brewed with yarrow as the main bittering agent, and then two other foraged herbs, bog myrtle and marsh rosemary, that must have been really widespread at the time, because hopped ale, when it came along, had sedative effects, and it's this Gruit ale is reported to have like stimulated the mind and increased sexual desire. Hopped ale sedated those things and didn't have any of the sort of psychotropic properties that these other herbs had in beer. But what it came down to is that the sort of Protestants' resentment of the Catholic Church's monopoly, and also resentment of their culture, of the culture of sort of inebriation, they didn't think it was, you know, holy, and they fought against it, and hops were kind of their weapon in doing that. It led to a drink that's got the popularity of the royals and the authority figures of the time, and eventually a kind of legislation came through that beer was meant to be brewed with hops. It was partly to do with the powers, like incentivizing it more and encouraging it more, and also the merchants, all these merchants that invested in it, and it could be scaled up a bit better, I understand. And basically Gruit ale went from something that was totally like the drink of the people to something that only the small holdings, the rural people, sort of kept alive for ages. And then in the following hundreds, like a couple of hundred years, it fell out of production there as well, and now it's all but been lost to common memory. One of the things that Old Tree is trying to do is to revive the kind of older fermentation culture. We're interested in how people used to brew, because how people used to brew is evidently very, very connected to the landscapes and the plant world.
So yeah, this is our cafe bar. It serves quite a few purposes in that it allows us to prepare food. It allows us to sell our drinks. It also allows us to have a gateway into the community, a public face. We call it a public interface, which for us is so important because we're not a brewery who makes a product, then sells that product for the sake of selling that product. We are a brewery who have a personality. Over and above a brand, we are the humans that are on the other end of the name and the term, the old tree.
I think it's really refreshing to see two people who are 24 and 25 who are aspiring to have a job which they love and to learn about the earth and give back to the earth and learn about plants and have that whole kind of knowledge is really refreshing. And to have that kind of the wanting to achieve kind of health and happiness and like this the spreading and the sharing of knowledge rather than that kind of yearning for wealth, the more people that think like this is better.
How's it going?
It's good.
Good. Right, what else is there in the nettle? That's the...
Citric acid is in, sugar is in.
That's all that we need to do for the tea, that's it. It's a really simple one.
They're very revolutionary thinkers, have a lot of understanding about the way the world is at the moment.
It's not easy. It's not easy because we're not wanting to adopt the more usual models, current models of industrial drinks production or commercial drinks production, which generally involve brewing things on a pretty big scale. Industrial processing methods like filtration and pasteurization in order to provide a considerable shelf life to a drink, so it can be transported considerable distances and sit on a shelf for 6 months and be stable. But that product will be often be lacking in some of the more beneficial nutrients and freshness that will be present in drinks that haven't undergone those sorts of processes. It is a challenge brewing drinks on a small scale without those sorts of methods and practices, because our drinks are more volatile and unstable, and ultimately it's never going to necessarily be as immediately or as obviously sort of commercially successful. So we're having to work out new streams of revenue and new practices to get drinks to people in the local market that can then generate revenue rather than the routine that everyone else is doing. So there's some challenges to negotiate.
So this is Fat Hen. This is edible. They used to feed it to chickens, hence the name Fat Hen. They didn't think it was good for human consumption, but living proof. We're trying out some hop production. The variety of hop here is called the Sussex hop. It's a really old variety that you don't really see used much in mainstream beer production anymore. Over here we've planted 50 or so soft fruit trees. I mean, we should get a harvest of these trees in 1 or 2 years' time. They won't be huge harvests, but obviously you have to start from essentially you have to start from seed, or you have to start from a very, very early age. You can't rush a garden or a forest garden because you have to work with the natural processes and seasons. So we're not kidding ourselves and thinking that overnight we're going to have a really high yielding garden. We're all young people, we're all in a society now which we see the cracks of. The word sustainability is a fast becoming outdated word. The notion of sustaining what we have here, what's out there, huge amounts of inequality, huge amounts of environmental degradation. Why would you want to sustain that? We're trying to come up with the kind of new terminology like regeneration. We're into regenerative brewing, we're into regenerative business models, regenerative economics. You know, we're despondent and we're charged and we're angry.
It's like a third, isn't it? Come on. 3.3.
You've got day jobs days.
Yeah.
I'll get back
Today
to wine
we're
then.
going to establish the volume inside this vessel.
10 kilograms of ginger, 8 kilograms of sugar. Gillian or Gillian? Gillian. Water. How much Gillian? It just says Gillian.
Gillian, the whole of all of her.
All of Gillian.
I believe so.
All of the liquid from. Okay, I'll carry on reading.
Carry on reading.
And then we put the sugar in the buckets, 4 buckets,
Yeah.
each tip a quarter of that, of this into each bucket,
Yeah.
dissolve the sugar in the concentrate, add water, cold water, which will then bring the temperature to a temperature that we can then pitch Gillian.
What happened to Gillian 1?
Gillian 1, we don't do that.
I'm just worried she has that today, not this.
It's not funny.
Speak to
It's a way
Gillian.
of laughing.
Like, there's a real sense of like freedom around these guys. You know, it's basically just gave me free reign to do whatever, and that's like awesome to know. But there wasn't like, it didn't feel like well held. It felt like I was stepping into something that required a lot of my personal energy, like way more than it needed to, and a lot of my personal responsibility, which I have my fair share of, but I also have my fair share of irresponsibility and naivety and immaturity in certain areas, which I felt like if there was a structure and a time frame and a rota and like a contract, maybe even like a paper contract of my roles and responsibilities and my basic pay, and maybe even like a contract that would be like, you know, incentivize me in some way. Like, it was this lack of structure that I was feeling was making me feel like I'm not sure if I want to continue here. Lack of understanding, like a real blind spot is what it felt like, more than lack of understanding, like just doesn't actually compute. Almost to the neglect of common sense. If the original ambitions are unrealistic based on the amount of time, energy and money that you put into something, then you've got to figure out another way of doing it, or your visions are going to stay in as visions. It's still possible for Old Tree to make one drink like the focal point of their marketing and money making, and I would only consider it selling out if the quality of the product lessened, and some people would argue that the quality would lessen because it's not been made in like an artisanal way, you know. Tom really likes to keep things artisan and I guess small scale, and kind of just gives himself a load of work to do. There's not much money being generated, and then to realizing how much more money they need to generate to pay their team. It feels like it's only just really been like fully accepted that it needs to be more of the business element, and the money element needs to be expanded. It's like this, if you put it on a pie chart, you know, all the other great things about it, like ecological sustainability, kind of outreach to like local community, providing like educational material, providing good nutrition would be huge. And then the bit about money would be maybe even minus. You know, it might not even be on there. It might be like over here, like, you know, you're missing something kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like moving that into there now and realizing, like, you know, how do we reorganize things? What do we have to sacrifice? What do we have to put more energy into?
We started doing pyrography at the beginning of starting Old Tree. It's just always kind of felt like the right aesthetic for the sort of idea, using wood and using like a way of marking the wood that's like, you know, as old as fire. I think that one of the reasons that humans are sort of destroying their only planet is the fact that they've forgotten of how to use the yeast and bacteria in the world to their advantage. You know, yeasts to ferment are just like in the air all the time. There's like invisible trillions of them, and they're on the plants that you can use. And people have like by and large completely forgotten that they can do wild fermentations, that they could like harvest some fruits, juice them, and use the yeasts that are just on the fruits to make them into a huge range of food and drink that would be really beneficial for them. And instead, somehow that's seen now as being kind of, you know, sort of unnatural and unhealthy in some way, like dirty almost. Like.
Do you think people ever think you're being an idealist?
Yeah, for sure. But you know, I love people that dream of the impossible. It's like they're the best people, and I'm you know, I sort of kind of happy to be. I'm happy to live in a kind of dream world because it's better than the current world. You have to work with the natural systems and natural timescales. Like, look how slowly a tree grows. Like, you can't break away from that. That's the reality of like geological time. Like, we are just living in a ridiculously fast bubble, and we're either just going to destroy ourselves really quickly, or we're going to work out how to live really beautifully and sustainably on the earth. I think that's like the path we have ahead of us.
And do you ever get tempted by the kind of cynical path to kind of believe we're doomed? Why try this?
I generally could feel hopeless quite a lot of the time, but I choose for my own kind of like mental health to feel optimistic. I feel often that I actually ignore the negative stuff, the evidence and the negative stuff, because I have to, because I do have this underlying like belief in it being better, I guess. I feel like I'm not prepared to let go of my childlike optimism. People have to feel that they're gonna create a world that's better than the one they inherited, or that's gonna have a future. I don't even see how capitalism can continue as a system unless people believe in its future, unless people believe a better future is gonna come out of it. If capitalism carries on destroying the underlying like systems that sustain it, then it's going to die as a system because people aren't going to believe in it. So it's like we have to have a post-capitalist system, and that's only going to come out of optimism. Like, that's only going to come out of believing in another way of doing things. And yeah, so it's like capitalism has to embrace a different system. Like, there are a lot of mistakes to make, and you do need a culture to remember it all, to remember how to do everything really well, because we're talking about like a huge like history of drinks here, like a huge variety of drinks and foods that just don't get grown, let alone like prepared anymore for the growth of Old Tree. It's like, it's more a sort of a cultural knowledge base than a sort of financial mission. As to a large degree. We've kind of acknowledged that the whole pace of like the economy, the growth economy, and the race. It's like a race. Is not going to work with the kind of thought and attention and kind of, for want of a better word, like research that we want to do to carry on the sort of this interest and this like passion that we've got about it all. Signing out of the financial race.